Hey everybody, this is Dr. Jason Piken. Welcome back to another episode of the Digestion Diaries. Today what we're going to be talking about is a follow-up to an old episode that I did that pertained to food sensitivities versus food allergies and how to address the reintroduction process when you've avoided foods that you think you're allergic to or sensitive to for a while. The question was asked to me by a patient and somebody that listens to the Digestion Diaries regularly, thanks for the question, is, well, how would I really reintroduce foods? When do I know if I'm ready to reintroduce foods? And how should I feel? What should I be looking for? Basically, all of the questions that pertain to reintroduction of foods when it pertains to food sensitivities, food allergies. So the first thing I want to do is talk a little bit about what I spoke about with food sensitivities and food allergies in the past. I'm going to do this probably a little bit more at length than I would if I've done a video in the past about a certain subject, because I'm thinking about getting rid of that video. It has an orange background. It just looks horrible. So I'm thinking of just tossing it all together. But for now, I'm just going to leave it. Background review. Food allergy is IgE allergy. It's a simple test that you can do, either a scratch test that you can do with your allergist or a blood test that you can do with your allergist or most other practitioners that can draw blood or get a lab analysis done. What they're looking for is an IgE allergy. It's a certain type of allergy that usually triggers a histamine response in the body. And that's what gives the true allergy name of itchiness and redness and bumps. And it tends to be that these types of allergies are very fast acting, that they're highly reactive. And what I find in my practice is that very many people already know what they're allergic to. So I don't often test them, but sometimes I do if somebody's really confused. And sometimes we're surprised. What happens very often with allergies that is the surprise is that very often people are eating the foods on a very regular basis that they're allergic to. Because an allergy can be this much or it can be this much or this much. It can be somewhere in between. It doesn't have to cause like the peanut allergies that we've all heard about where you get like almost an anaphylactic shock. You could actually die. Your throat can close up. An allergy to food doesn't have to be that severe. It can be. It could also be something that just triggers your immune system to have a response. And when it's a true food allergy rather than a sensitivity, you're triggering an IgE antibody that's basically a marker in your immune system that says, hey, this thing is bad. And once that association is set up, it's probably never going to go away, but it can decrease or increase depending on your lifestyle. We'll get to that. What a food sensitivity is the same immune system reaction to a food, except you're not getting an IgE response. You might get an IgG or IgA response. So what that means is, simply put, a different tag, a different part of your immune system is reacting. Instead of a classic histamine response, which gives that redness and itchy and burning and inflammation right away, an IgG, IgA is a reaction by the immune system that says, hey, there's something going up. Now, I spoke about this part in other videos, but when anything happens to you that raises your inflammatory response, anything that triggers your immune system to work, first, is a good thing that your immune system is working. But anything that triggers your immune system to work and you're exposing yourself to that substance over and over and over again on a regular basis, well, what that does is it heightens your level of inflammatory response altogether. And not only are you being affected when you eat that food, but that food can be causing a reaction to another food, a cross-reactivity. See, let's give wheat as an example, just because it's such a common one. But let's go away from wheat because I've used it so many times. Let's use eggs. Okay, so you have not a food allergy to eggs, but a food sensitivity. You might already notice this because when you eat eggs on a regular basis, when you eat too many eggs, or maybe when you eat a lot of just egg whites, something like that, you don't feel as good as you do when you eat eggs occasionally. That would be a classic presentation for a food sensitivity versus a food allergy, and most often these things are ignored because you just don't feel that bad. But what's happening is every single time you eat that egg or whatever you're sensitive to, every single time you eat it, you're telling your immune system to just fire and get excited. And again, it's good that we have our immune system to help us out, to heal. But if you're on a regular basis eating something, smelling something that you're allergic to, exposing yourself in any way to something that causes your immune system to react in not a tiny manner, but a progressively higher manner, well, what that's going to do is it's going to upregulate your immune and inflammatory functions all together. And inflammation, again, is good, but when it's stimulated all the time, the system can break down and go out of whack. And now you can start to be sensitive to many different things, and you can have inflammation spread throughout your body. And this is how foods can trigger joint pain, muscle aches, headaches. It's because your body is just basically on a heightened state of alert, and it's waiting for any little trigger, and that will set it off. So what's the classic fix for these food sensitivities, at least, and sometimes food allergies, is going through an elimination reintroduction diet. Eliminating the foods that you think are bad for you or that you've had tested and you know that are bad for you, and then staying away from them for a period of time. That's what we're going to get into. And then slowly reintroducing those foods back into your system. Now, more often than not, what I see in my patients is they're not really sure what they're sensitive to and what they're not. And there is testing. There's a great lab called Cyrex out in Arizona that I've heard great things about. And to be honest with you, I've seen a few reports, but I don't use it myself. One, because I'm a New York practitioner, and in New York, we are restricted from using that lab. Number two, there's debate over the worthiness of food sensitivity testing. See, some of the reports I've gotten on a woman that had multiple food reactions said there was nothing wrong with her. And I looked into it, and I couldn't find a good reason why she wasn't getting any positive reaction on this test, even though she was sensitive to some foods. Didn't make sense. And there are others that the lab test tells them that they're sensitive to something, but it tells them a list this big. It's a gigantic list, and it's hard for the person to wrap their heads around all that information. And because of those two extremes, what I like to start with before doing testing is simply doing an elimination reintroduction diet. So what that means is you're spending a period of time eating from a very small list of foods. Now, this isn't healthy to do forever, but you're going to just narrow your list of foods to get to the point where you feel good. Now, if the diet you chose at first, whether it's ketogenic diet or a vegan diet or a paleo diet, doesn't work for you, it doesn't make you feel good, well, then you got to switch to a different one, a different experiment. And what you do is you pick a diet that you feel would be good for you based upon your food sensitivities and reactions from the past, what makes sense to you, and you start living on that diet. I'd say 2 weeks is going to be a bare minimum for somebody that's just experimenting and playing and isn't really into learning much. 4 weeks staying on whatever diet you pick is really the baseline that you have to do as a minimum to get your body's inflammatory cycles to start calming down. And 12 weeks on that diet, whatever diet you choose, is really, in my mind, the optimal. The optimal time before you start experimenting with anything else, you want to give yourself about 12 weeks to let your immune system calm down, let your gut start to heal, and then you can start reintroducing foods again. So let's say you've gone from the 2, 4, 12-week process of eliminating. Now, when you reintroduce, here is the process where you have to learn. Right? So first, you introduce from a list. If you want, contact me. I will give you my leaky gut diet protocol, which starts with a program called the Leaky Gut Diet, which is a version of AI Paleo. And then it teaches you line by line, week by week, how to reintroduce foods so you can tell what's right and what's wrong. When you reintroduce foods, I'll give you a hint of this list. It's nightshades, because you weren't eating them before, nuts and seeds, eggs, dairy, and these are 1 week at a time. And for those of you who have already been on a long-term diet that makes them feel good. And they've even done longer than 12 weeks, 6 months, a year. They've really spent time healing their gut, but they just want to go back to those foods they thought there was a problem before. This information right now is for you, because all the other information is I'm going to give you in my leaky gut diet protocol or the greatest diet on the planet video. I send them together. There's a link on my website, but just contact me in any way, shape, or form. drjasonpiken.com is my website, and I'll send you the information. So next, let's go back to the person that has been great for a very long period of time and wants to determine how to reintroduce foods when they've been sick of them, because I just recently had this happen with a patient. So let me give you the situation of this patient. This patient started to reintroduce foods that she was sensitive to in the past, and she felt good introducing them. She wasn't getting an immediate reaction. She didn't even get a reaction a few days later. The problem occurs when something like this happens. This patient expanded her diet so much, so quickly, not too quickly, over weeks, that the problems she originally had triggered back and flashed back. And that is very frustrating, and I understand that this is why I'm making this video, for other people to hear this, because if that does happen to you, the number one thing that you need to do, and unfortunately this is hard for some people in their mindset, but it shouldn't be, it's go back to the very beginning diet that made you feel good in the first place. Start from scratch. Remember, when dealing with chronic gut issues, sometimes we have to spend a very long period of time understanding what's right and wrong for us. What I suggested to this person, and what I suggest to you, if this sounds similar, that you do well on a diet and then you try and reintroduce foods that you're avoiding and the cycle starts over again, is spend that 12 weeks on that diet that made you feel good. And then it's not like you have to reintroduce foods to discover what you're sensitive to or not. You already know it. Sometimes food sensitivities can be eliminated. Sometimes we can create a tolerance, a resilience that's long lasting. But you know what? For white potatoes, that's my sensitivity. White potatoes, that is my nemesis. And no matter how long I've stayed away from white potatoes and reintroduced them back, they always cause a reaction. And to be honest with you, I don't completely avoid them, because that reaction is very minimal, because I'm very resilient. And every once in a while, I don't know that white potato is in something. That's what happened last night. I didn't know it was a binder in this vegetable souffle thing that I was having that tasted really good. And I thought it was almost cheese that was holding it together. But I asked my wife and she said, no, it was potato flakes. She didn't buy them. She picked it up at the store. We don't use potato flakes for cooking. But I ate it anyway, and I had my classic potato reaction. Very minimal, gone today, but I don't have to experiment with white potatoes anymore. I just know my body for some reason doesn't like them, and I've been tested. It's not a food allergy. It's some sort of food sensitivity that I can't shake. So what you could do is suffer anytime you eat it, or just understand that you might be able to tolerate a little bit of this food in your life, but if you have that food too often, it will start to spill over to cause other types of health issues. Because where you have one spot of inflammation or irritation, even if it's just in your gut, it's going to spill over into brain, it's going to spill over into your mood, it's going to spill over into your muscles, your joints, your other organs. So please, if you've already done the experiments and you know already what works for you and what doesn't, just stick with what works. I know it's the hardest thing to hear, that sometimes you can't eliminate a food problem, but you can well manage it. You can. All you have to do is stay away from 1, 2, 5 ingredients. Maybe your list is longer, and I do believe if you have a long list of ingredients, that if you get rid of the majors, if you find out what those are, and if you need to work with a health practitioner, and this is where sometimes that testing comes into play, because if you've narrowed down and know what foods trigger you and you're good with your diet and you've been clean for a while and then you get tested, then you get a lot more clear results from the blood test, rather than doing that blood test right at the beginning and getting this big long list of foods that you need to avoid. So I hope this information has helped. Basically, the summary is you might have a food allergy and you definitely want to stay away from foods that you're allergic to for a very long period of time, if not forever. If you have a food sensitivity, that's something different. That's something that you can overcome over time, but you might not be able to. And even if you can tolerate that food in small amounts, just be weary of how often you expose yourself to that food, because for myself, if I ate white potatoes twice a week, I'd probably be a little bit more grumbly, upset, bloated in my stomach. My bowel movements wouldn't be as friendly as they are today. And so I really minimize it, and it's usually an accident when I eat it. So I hope this information helps you, and please come back to me with more questions. I'd love to know more on how to answer your questions, but I only know when you ask them. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.